Willard Ford, thank you for joining the show. I'm excited to have you.
Thank you.
So I really want to talk about a couple things. One is I know you have a launch of the Will and Kengo 2-on-1. It's a new premier thing that you're doing. I want to learn more about that, how people can get trained with you. Also want to talk about Strong Sports Gym, the social club, what you got going on there in Pasadena. And I know you were having a launch May 3rd, correct? So by the time this comes out, it'll be the launch. But I want to kind of talk to you about your philosophies on health and strength and nutrition, because every time we sit down and have a conversation, you're telling me something that I honestly don't hear anywhere else. Like, you're always kind of blow my mind. So I said, we got to sit down, grab some microphones and have a conversation. So for starters, maybe we could talk a little bit about Strong Sports and what you have going on there in Pasadena in the grand opening.
Strong Sports has been around in some form or another since about 2002. Mm-hmm. At first was a company that I had that imported some sporting gear. And then in 2006, we opened our first club. And this club was primarily a pro fight gym. Mm-hmm. So we had camps that would sort of come with us because a bunch of fighters had sort of migrated from a previous camp. And then we hosted their preparation. So we had a couple guys who were fighting in various, promotions, and they needed to get a group of training partners together and have a clean, professional place to work out. So it started out with a ring, a boxing ring, a wrestling room, and some small selection of weights. And that was went that way for a short period of time, and I decided to open to the public. When we opened to the public, we had what we called Strong Sports Gymnasium. It was in this building that I owned at the time, which was called the Kim Sing Theater, mm-hmm. and we had the
Chinatown?
First in Chinatown.
Yeah, beautiful theater.
Yeah, the first time, the first gym we had was about 300 square feet. It was just a wrestling room with a couple of heavy bags. Wow. Then we expanded into a bigger room, which was about another 500 square feet, and that had the boxing ring and some more heavy bags. And then we expanded into another room, which had a weightlifting room. So as we added these different services, it became more open to the public, and we built up a membership of probably 75 people. Mm-hmm. It wasn't intended to be a heavy, commercial gym.
Right. Yeah.
It wasn't going to compete.
It's not like a 24-hour fitness. Yeah.
No, it wasn't competing, but it was the level of expertise in the room was really good. So we had world-class athletes, world-class coaches, and we were the depository for these people who were sort of just landed together, who had been working together for some time. So that was like 2006, 2007. And primarily there were 4 or 5 of us who sort of started out. Mm-hmm. Then when I sold the building in 2015, we stayed there for a little bit longer, then moved to Mission Junction, which is the warehouse area. Mm-hmm. And that became Strong Sports Gym, not the gymnasium. We had 7,000 square feet, 12 employees, a couple hundred students. It was very public. It was open. People would just walk in off the streets. It was a totally different experience. And that was pretty hard to manage. And I can get into that later, but it wasn't something that I really wanted to do, but there was some pressure to keep on expanding. At that point, we weren't really dealing with pro fighters anymore. Those guys had aged out, and the pro fighters were a handful anyway. And then with the lockdowns in 2020 with COVID, we were basically put out of business. Mm-hmm. We couldn't conduct business. We had to forfeit the location, the equipment, everything had to be auctioned off, pennies on the dollar. We didn't stay in the game long enough to get any funding, mm-hmm. To get PPP money or something like that. Yeah. We were on a pretty tight budget and timeline. So when other people were strategizing about what was going to happen, this is before any of those programs were available. Right. So there was no money available. So there was nothing to keep it going. And I had a good relationship with my landlord. So we closed down. And then, a couple months in, I started training people out of my garage. At that point, I needed to make money. And we had about 40 people training in my garage.
Amazing.
Coming through, and sessions in the morning, sessions at night. We didn't know much about COVID at the time. We suspected what it was, but we didn't know. Mm-hmm. So, there was a lot of masking, a lot of requirements, cleanliness requirements. There was assembly requirements, what we were doing. So if we wanted to hang out, we would go outside and on my front yard. And surprisingly, no one really complained. My neighbors were great. It was just in my garage. It was a very small garage, maybe 300 square feet. we survived that. And then 95% of them came to the new gym in Pasadena.
Yeah.
So we opened
Beautiful
up.
gym. Beautiful
Yeah,
location.
we opened about 3 years ago as a private club. We didn't open up to the public. So that was completely private, referral only, and that became the Strong Sports Social Club. And now we are launching a new enterprise, which is Will and Kengo, a 2-on-1 training method where you have 2 coaches working with you to bring in new people out of the general public. So you don't need a referral anymore to get into the club.
Who is Kengo?
Kengo is my partner. He was my training partner right around 2000 until...
He's built like a tank, by the way.
He's built like a tank. He's a former professional fighter. He fought for, I think, 15 or 18 years or something like that. I think he had about 20 professional fights.
His English is a little broken, but he's like the nicest guy. And he's just awesome.
He's the absolute best. The
and
most
it's almost
loyal.
like you guys are kind of like opposites in your communication style in some regards.
Yeah, I'm kind of a little bit more wordy and he's very simple. But his... the information behind what he's doing is perfect. Right. He really knows what he's talking about. Yeah. We spent a lot of time coaching together, talking about methodology, developing ways to deal with students or members and doing that. So there's this sort of balance right now where we have the club, which maintains its exclusivity. Mm-hmm. It's not intended to be exclusive, but it's through referrals. Yeah. And there's a whole sort of life in that gym that already exists. So, and that sort of goes up to 120, goes down to 100, but I don't do any external marketing. Right. Can't find us on Google. It's just like an invisible effort.
So the 2-on-1 that launches at the front of the gym, the private training, that comes May 3rd with, tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, the idea is that you have someone doing the programming and testing and all the things that make programming work. Mm-hmm. And then you have a trainer. In this case, most of the time, the trainer will be Kengo. He fits the part. Mm-hmm. Guy can squat twice as much as I can almost, even though he's only 20 pounds heavier. He's a beast. So he fits that mold. Mm-hmm. I'm a little bit older, a little bit longer in the tooth, getting a little bit smaller over time. And as I age, I'm more in the programming and testing role. Yeah. So my background in endurance sports means I took a very big interest in the models and practices of endurance athletes and the science involved in creating programming that's progressive for different aspects of people's physical journey. Right. So when we're teaching, if it's barbell lifting or if it's some sort of functional strength component, or if it's basic like occupational therapy, how to get in and out of bed, how to sit up and stand down, sit down and stand up, how to reach for things, we'll cover all that stuff in the strength and conditioning program. And then there is a sports lab. In the sports lab, we do a wide battery of tests. So we have resting metabolic rate tests, which is an important part of building a diet and nutrition plan. We have VO2 testing, lactate threshold testing, functional power testing, all these sort of things so you can have the data that supports the programming. And the programming is sitting with me and figuring out a program that works for individuals on an individual basis.
And that's definitely what I wanted to drill down on, which is when I rediscovered, because we worked together about a decade ago, and when I rediscovered you on Instagram and saw this private club, and I was like, well, I got to reach out to Willard, and I came in and saw everything, and I was looking for, I was expecting, people doing, jumping jacks and running around and having treadmills and doing all this stuff. And you really just emphasized strength, be strong. And it was something that kind of stuck with me because you're like, yeah, you can do all that stuff. You can do yoga, you can do all these things, but you really should be strong. It's like a foundational pillar. So I wanted to kind of drill down on why be strong.
There's a couple reasons. First of all, as you age, it becomes more of a focus because you can't do your sport as much. Yeah. So for me, I naturally gravitated towards it. And I was impressed by, but not convinced by, a lot of the new methods. And the idea that you focus on the ability to develop force, which is strength training, became very intoxicating to me because it informed everything. And when you look at the sort of the pyramid of qualities and human physical qualities, you look at endurance, strength, power, speed, whatever these things are, you understand with study that they're foundational to each other. So if you want to have an overall effect, you need to have an overall ability to develop force. So the first priority for any person, athlete or otherwise, should be to develop as much force as they can and maintain healthy movement and biomechanics and be injury-free. But the idea is that you want to invest time in your strength, your just basic ability to become strong. And that requires simple yet progressive programming and also control of your inputs, eating, rest, timing, all that sort of stuff. So for instance, if you are an endurance athlete and you're prioritizing maybe running, right? And running is your sport and you're doing a lot of miles, no matter how much you run, you're not going to get stronger under the barbell. But if you lift weights and you increase your force production, it will have an impact on your endurance. So the pyramid is, there's an inverse relationship.
And that feels very contrarian.
You would think that you would want to develop qualities that are only related to your sport, right? But underlying it, you have to not look at just what your sport requires of you. You have to work on how these building blocks interact. So if you look at the pyramid, and there's an inverse relationship in this pyramid with volume. So your strength training depends on the sport, will be foundation to your endurance. Your strength training and your endurance will be foundational to your power. And your strength training, your endurance, and your power are foundational to speed. So if you go to the gym, you spend a lot of time doing fun speed drills, you'll have a small effect. But if you change the amount of force you can develop, either the difference between a 150-pound squat to a 300-pound squat, or the ability to put out 1,000 watts or 1,500 watts or whatever it is, whatever your data point is for measurement, that's going to have a greater effect on anything. So if you look at how physics works, right? Force production becomes the most important thing. Speed, distance, that's sort of power. These are things that can definitely develop over time, but you're going to have the biggest effect when you spend more time developing your basic strength. And that's best served by a simple, progressive process where you have a stress, you have a recovery, and you have a adaptation. And you just keep on running that routine.
You know, I was surprised to see various members in the club that didn't fit the profile. Right. And I think for me, that was the most surprising. And it was kind of like the big light bulb, because I expected to go there and see just, you know, everyone just getting ripped and young guys that are in their 20s. And what I saw was the contrary. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the different types of members that come in and the different things that you're working them through. Like, I believe there was a guy in there with
MS.
To see him in the gym and getting it, that was like, whoa, like you don't typically see that, especially in a sports club or, you know, strength training club. So it's why strength for those people?
It's interesting because when I started out, it was all pro athletes. That's it. Or people who are at an elite level. So,
so that kind of fits the profile I was talking about.
That fits that profile. And these guys are big guys, you know, in general for their body weight. They're muscular, they're athletic, they have some talent. And they sort of collect around the services that are provided to them. Incidentally, there's very little money in that unless you get an outlier like a Mayweather or someone, right? And the second that you develop that athlete, even if they came in with all this talent, they're going to leave you because whatever reason. So the important thing is to realize that the referral system is a catch-all. If someone comes in and they are feeling better because they're doing basic strength training, they can get up and down easier, they can perform their work easier, they're feeling injury-free, they had a bad back their whole lives, is feeling better. Now they want to get their parents in, they want to get their friends in, they want to get their aunts and uncles in. So our age spread is actually sort of late teens all the way through to people in their 90s. It's been very gratifying and interesting to interact with people in their 70s to their 90s. Actually, currently our oldest person is 80, but we have had people that old, is that you can get incredible gains in that time. And there was a recent study that said you can add muscle in your 60s in exactly the same way you can to your 90s. There's no difference in the capacity to develop muscle, whether or not that study is real or not. It is encouraging to think that people can start strength training at any time. Our focus used to be combat sports. So we had boxers, wrestlers, jiu-jitsu people, mixed martial arts people. That was our focus. Now our focus has morphed, although we maintain a boxing program in the club, our focus has moved to strength training because it's foundational to everything. It doesn't mean we don't do other things. There are people doing high intensity intervals or doing base, training for their endurance, or people working on specific things that is programmed for them. But there's also people there who are just to get stronger. They're suffering from the early stages of sarcopenia. They have metabolic disorder. They don't know how to eat. They don't know how to do activity. They don't know what to do. They're either sent there by a family member and then they have to pass muster to be in the club, or they're sent there by their doctor and they come through the front door at Will Kengo. but it's someone who has a need. I'm not out there convincing anyone. There's plenty of literature, and there's plenty of Instagram, Facebook, periodical, newspaper information that's telling us that we need to be more active and we need to build muscle.
Well, so that goes along with a game I like to play, which is the Myth Busters. If you're busting 3 myths that you hear on YouTube, on Instagram, you pick the platform, but you just kind of hear it over and over again. Something that would be a very modern myth, something maybe that's kind of come to popularity in the last 3 or 4 years. Like, what would you say those 3 myths would be?
Well, surprisingly, most of the information for training isn't new. So things go through phases. So I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop for high intensity intervals to make their comeback.
Sure.
When you look at intense training without the proper base, you usually have a high rate of injury. So for instance, for a while, low weight, high rep exercises were all the rage. So let's say it was a barbell. So you're doing CrossFit or whatever, and they have you doing 100 clean and jerks or 100 power cleans or 100 snatches, whatever it is. When you do something 100 times, you lose your focus and you're repeating the same activity over and over again, and you just have 100 opportunities to get it wrong. As you're trained by a real coach and you hone down on a set of 5, you can get the same benefit, and not a better benefit, from lifting heavy. And everybody can. So let's say an older woman who's in her 80s comes in and she says, I need to gain a little muscle. She needs the same care and coaching that an elite athlete would. They need to learn how to do it. They need to learn how to put or adapt and eat and sort of like respond to the requirements of getting stronger, right? Mm-hmm. And so the thing that, has been the hardest to dispel is the trend is really this sort of intensity beats everything. And the value proposition is how sweaty and how tired you are. That's really hard to fight against people, because the benefit is in having a progressive program that improves a quality. Yeah. And those qualities are endurance, strength, power, and speed.
Right.
You could break it down.
Worked me hard this morning.
Yeah.
And I wasn't panting, and it didn't have all the other cues that you would get if I, went to a HIIT class.
That comes later, and that's usually done with different types of training. And that is a big part of training, is to do something which is repetitive to the point where you're almost a failure. Most people don't need that. My basic philosophy is that most people need strength training. They need to have a basic cardiovascular program. And there's some benefit from doing 1 or 2 really hard cardiovascular workouts a week. Most people aren't up to that. Yeah. They don't need that. It would be great, but it's not necessary. What would you say
is the myth around cardio?
The myth around cardio is that you're going to be able to, well, it depends on what your particular dysmorphia is.
Yeah. And I'm just saying, like, from what you hear from from the general.
That cardio is going to make you stronger. It's the slowest way to make you stronger, and you only get so strong. So there's that. Let's say that's myth 2, is that you can only pick from one type of exercise and then you're good for everything. Right. They are foundational to each other's, and while strength increases your quality of life because you can do more things, you can get around unassisted, it doesn't necessarily, according to the literature, increase the duration of your life. But cardiovascular exercise has been indicated to increase, the length of your life. So if you have a mixed program with both, with adequate programming and rest and recovery built in, right? So you have the rest phase or the recovery phase, and then you have the adaptation phase. You should be able to extend your life and improve your life, right? So this idea that you can only do one, and that's going to be the catch-all for everything, Well,
I like what you were saying about the people train for their sport, and that I could see them kind of sticking to the one thing. Yeah. Because that's the repetition that they get.
Depends on what they're there for. But, tennis is not the best way to get in shape. Boxing is not the best way to get shape. Tennis is not the best way to get strong. Boxing is not the best way to get strong. Right. The best way to get in shape is to swim, bike, or run, right? To get conditioning and to have a measured effect. So you have a measured, sort of stress, and then you have the recovery, then you have the adaptation, then you can increase it. But if that first day you're going to Soul Cycle, not to bag them, but if you go to one of these high intensity interval places and the whole point is to kick your dick in and come out just drenched in sweat, if that's the value proposition to get you to feel like you had a really hard workout, otherwise we can't sell you another single visit, then that's their business model. But it's not a very progressive model, because what happens is people start going twice a week, 3 days a week. The real people who buy in go 6 days a week, 7 days a week, and then they have some form of an injury or burnout that happens.
Yeah.
You got to give someone a balanced program. I don't even let people lift weights more than 3 days a week for strength training. Bodybuilding's different, right? Or advanced powerlifting would require maybe more. But most people don't require more than 3 times a week, and anyone over 50 can get away with twice a week.
Okay.
Right?
So let's talk about a third myth around nutrition after you finish.
All right. The third myth is that things that affect those qualities that don't.
Yeah.
So some people can, they confuse the difficulty of something to the impact that it has on one of those qualities.
Yeah,
so they go to a Pilates class or they go to a yoga class. No, that was really hard. I'm getting strong. And there's some adaptations that happen. You have to get some mitochondrial efficiency, maybe some density, but really getting stronger requires a linear approach to increasing that quality, which is the ability to develop force. Fastest way to do it is with barbells. Yeah, kettlebells and all that stuff is good. And you can put an 80-pound kettlebell in your hand and you can do a goblet squat, right? But you can't put 300 pounds in your hands. So you end at 80 pounds.
Right.
But if you do goblet squats with an 80-pound kettlebell and you do it 40 times, you're not addressing strength. You're addressing muscular endurance. You're becoming better at doing that activity, but you're not getting stronger per se, at least within a specific definition of what force production is, right? Just because you can do 50 goblet squats with 80 pounds doesn't mean you can lift 300 pounds.
Yeah, it's kind of like math.
It's just arithmetic. And the best way to do it, or add weight to a barbell.
So an honorable mention then on the Mythbusters, because I'm just saying the honorable mention. We were talking about nutrition this morning. Yeah. So what would you say you hear when it comes to nutritional myths?
I think there's a fundamental understanding right now that's emerging about what is required to have a healthy diet, and it's changing. You have the government push right now to change what we think of as healthy. You have the whole health food movement. You have the supplement people. You have all these different groups pushing whatever their narrative is about food. But food is, if you take out the pleasure of eating a pint of ice cream or whatever it is that you like to do in your free time, drinking a 6-pack of beer, if you're looking at it, you really want to start looking at the overall effect on what you're trying to do, right? The first thing is, I might want to live longer. That's what I want to do. Well, feed that. I might want to get stronger. Feed that. I want to become more independent. Feed that. Whatever it is that you want to do, you need to feed that effort.
Man,
now, there's some basic ideas about what that means in terms of macronutrients, micronutrients, all that sort of stuff. But essentially, feed what you want to do. If you're a book nerd and you want to roll up and you're going to just squirrel away in some corner for the rest of your life and you don't care what happens to you, you're going to play chess, whatever, then that's fine. There's room for people who are on that path. But if you're interested in your health, you need to really look at what the inputs have to be. And from a diet standpoint, one of the myths that's dying right now is that you don't need much protein. Now, protein isn't just something that you eat because it's got some sort of magical property. Eating a lot of protein, and when I'm talking about protein, I'm talking about animal proteins, and I'm not against veganism. But let me just start with saying the animal proteins provide certain nutrients that are necessary to achieve certain goals. If you're going to be a monk and you're living in Thailand and the aesthetic, or in India, and the aesthetic is to get skinnier and skinnier and your success is based on that, well, then that's the proper diet for being a monk. But if you want to get more muscular, there's certain things you have to sort of get at, because you want to not go into an old person's home when you're 68. You want to wait until you're in your 90s or whatever.
I was vegan for a long time, and a lot of the people that fell into it at the time that I did, let's say 15 years ago, we talked about this a little bit. It was kind of like that early Whole Foods movement. And I think people were just kind of scared. I know personally, I didn't know what to eat. I was like, where's my meat coming from? Where's my eggs coming from? Where's the milk coming from? What's in it? Is everything processed? So I just got nervous, and I was like, well, maybe if I just eat, whole foods, then I don't have to be as concerned about where my animal products are coming from. But then that kind of became a bit of a trap unto itself as well, because then that became very commercial. And then you had companies like Beyond, and then you fall into this trap of eating all this other processed food. right? So, and I think that's pretty common for a lot of folks out there that say they're healthy, but I said you can always be a very unhealthy vegan.
Yeah, and some of the most unhealthy people I know because they don't maintain the appropriate amount of lean muscle, skeletal muscle, because their diets, they become unhealthy. So they can have metabolic disorder no matter how many micronutrients you have. They sort of, they're picking up pebbles and avoiding the rocks, right? So that's probably not the best way to do it. Now, can a vegan who has a careful attention to their macronutrient requirements get big and strong? Yeah, it's just harder. Can you take supplements? Maybe. There's some supplements out there that claim to be as good as that.
Well, that's another reason I want to sit down with you, because every time I bring something up, I'm like, Willard's going to have an answer for this. Willard's going to, like, if I brought up IV, what's the whole movement?
Like the IV, the guys who take that?
Yeah. Right? Like, what do you say to those people?
Seems like a good way to waste a lot of money. You can also drink water.
Right.
You can avoid alcohol. Right. Okay. Why are people in there,
Let's talk about hot sweat yoga.
If you like it, do it. Yeah. If you love it, it's the only thing that gets you out of bed, because for whatever reason, man or woman, child, doesn't matter. If that's what motivates you, it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
It's suboptimal in terms of time management. But if your goal is to get strong, you need to do a linear progression in strength training, right? Yeah. You need to get stronger. If you lift for a year and you're lifting the same amount of weight, I don't see what the point would be.
Right.
If you are working to become a better runner. Now, with age, of course, there's a plateau and you have to manage your decline. But I'm talking about someone who's on the up things. But if you start lifting at 60 and at 65, you're not lifting more weight than you were at 60, right? And you get to your sort of technical and biological potential, and then you start to go down, that makes sense. But even a 90-year-old's going to get stronger. They're going to get more muscular. They're going to get stronger. They're going to work on that. I mean, that's pretty much guaranteed if they have the right inputs, which is the right recovery strategies, the right inputs in terms of food and, basic stress reduction stuff.
Are there general benchmarks like average person should get so much rest, average person should get so much protein, average person should, work so many times in a week, right? Because I feel like we, the novice, approach working out, and I'm speaking for all my novice brethren and sisters out there, you're like, well, I want to be healthy. I want to do something. I don't know entirely what to do, but there's a gym right there. And if I go get a membership, I could just show up and figure stuff out. And you kind of flounder and move around. But, in theory, you feel like you're healthy because you're doing something.
I always say, don't let a book hit you in the ass on the way out of the room, right? I mean, a book is a good place to start.
Yeah.
Paul Horn, I maintain coaches. So Paul Horn is my weightlifting coach. I went and found him about 7 years ago now. And I've lifted since I was a young competitive cyclist, probably 16 years old. I had a terrible coach for Olympic weightlifting. We went right into Olympic weightlifting because we didn't know. We were just doing whatever we were told to do. And I went through various iterations. I worked with a fantastic coach named Sean Waxman, just a little bit. And then one of his partners, Ken Vick, over at Velocity. They're both great coaches. Sean was more technical. And then at Velocity, they were more sort of like, it was like more of a commercial place, but they had sort of like a performance institute. I've been exposed to and spent a little time with people like the sports physicist. He's one of I think he might be the only guy besides Marvin Marinovich's brother who is accredited by him. So I spent a lot of time sort of looking at what he's doing. He used to coach people in my gym. I'd watch him work with them. Not saying that I knew it. There was a guy named there's a lot of guys I've seen. And I've been around. I've been trained by several people. And then ultimately, when I found Paul Horn, I found that he introduced me to a system that was logical, easy to follow, respected my time, and was just monolithic in its requirement that you get better at what you're doing. So 4 years later, 5 years later, 7 years later, you're still getting comments on your squat. There's always something you could be doing better. Coaching is, once you subvert yourself to a coaching relationship, just keep doing that.
Yeah. So you would say the benchmark is improve. There's
the
no
benchmark
general...
is to get what you want.
Yeah.
Not everyone has to lift. Some people are just brilliant and they want to do other stuff and they don't care how long they live. There's a trade-off. Sure. But if you're concerned with quality of life and longevity, you should be lifting, doing some cardio, and lifting is inherently technically demanding. So you need to have a coach. It's better to have a coach working in anything. If it's a writing coach, like a tutor or someone you send your stuff to for edits, it doesn't matter. It's always good to have oversight.
Yeah.
And that's what we sort of provide. But, is there anything intrinsically wrong with just going to the gym and dicking around on 15 machines? No, it's better than nothing.
Right.
But it's very difficult to get strong that way.
Yeah.
If you're there to go look at the opposite sex or the same sex, you're there to pick up people, you're there to make friends, that might be your basic bottom line. I go to yoga because I like to meet other people who are into the yogic tradition. Or I like to go to Pilates because I like to eat salads for lunch. I mean, do whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me. I'm perfectly happy to have people do that because that's better than not doing anything.
Right.
But when they're ready to improve a quality, right, which leads to these two outcomes, which is better quality of life or longer life, right? The two things that, as I approach where I'm past middle age, I start to get real concerned with. I want to help people with the tools necessary to do that in a progressive way.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Now, you can go to your doctor and get, or one of these crazy health clinics where they do 50 or 100 or 300 biomarkers and they sell you supplements and peptides and hormones and whatever. And it's just that's one way to do it. You might get some benefits and there's tons of media that supports that sort of thing. What
do you think about supplements? What's your take on the general topic of supplements?
Supplements can be helpful.
How do you determine what's helpful?
Well, the first thing is a blood test.
Okay.
So taking a multivitamin, in most cases, you might as well throw it in the toilet, but it might catch something that you're weak on, right?
Okay.
But, if you think of, I'm going to take some sort of greens product and I'm going to take a multivitamin and I'm going to take some sort of, blood sugar or cholesterol medication that's not a prescribed medication. I'm going to take this thing and you look at it and you're spending $200 a month. You might want to just every 2 or 3 months take a blood test to see what you're deficient in.
Every 2 or 3 months?
Yeah, sure. If you can. I mean, that would be great. But if not, you could do it once a year. But you want to look at your blood work and you can put that into AI, put it into ChatGPT or Gronk AI, and it can give you an analysis, which I think is in some cases less careful, but more thorough than if you go to a doctor. Now, I'm not saying don't go to your doctor. Go to your doctor. Go see the professional that you. You're
not a licensed doctor.
I am not licensed to talk about this stuff. However, if you go to a big box hospital and they say, "What are you here for?" You say, "I'm here for my general checkup," and they kind of just blow you off and do a couple tests and say you're fine. That didn't really give you the information you were after.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people are.
And you're offering blood work, right?
I don't do it, but I tell people to go get it.
Yeah.
So they should so if they're heavy into it. So I've never sold a single supplement through my gym, which is basically me throwing away $5,000 to $10,000 in profit a month.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean I wouldn't.
And that says a lot.
Well, I don't because I'm not sure what people need and I'm not sure that they all need it. So once you're sitting on inventory, you have to move that inventory. Do you have a t-shirt? I have 12 of these. I got to get rid of 11.
Yeah. Like my hoodie?
Yeah, like your hoodie, right?
Yeah.
I got to get rid of this stuff because the next thing's coming in. Same thing for supplements. Yeah. Oh, we found a new one. And there's tons of like Instagram accounts where people are on the cutting edge of sports science or neuroscience or, physiology, and they're talking about this stuff. And these guys are going so fast and suggesting so much stuff that quite often they have to have a retraction or capitulate on some sort of idea, but they get behind it. Because
they're moving so fast.
They're just churning it out. And I don't blame them. Because I'm glad those guys are out there, but I wouldn't do that because now you got to monitor what people are doing. So I take about 5 different supplements. I take those supplements because for my particular blood work, it seemed like it makes sense. And some of them are just a hedge, right? Just like a guess.
Yeah.
And some of them for a specific thing. So
but you're smarter than the average bear and more studied.
Yeah. I mean, I do. I don't just, Peter Attia or, Max Lugavere or the neuroscientist guy. Yeah. What's his name? Huberman. They're doing this program, so I should do this program. Like, that's just like, that's like looking at someone and saying, oh, Greg LeMond or Lance Armstrong does this ride, so I should do that same ride. It's just inappropriate. It's interesting that they're doing it, and it's great to hear what they have to say, but quite often they're early days because they have to come out with content all the time. And then quite often they're dead wrong and they have to retract or retreat from that. There's all these studies about taking micronutrient pills or powders or whatever,
Right.
whether or
Yeah.
not your body absorbs it that way. I don't know what I believe.
Right. What do you believe about hormones?
I think people, my opinion about taking hormones is that everyone in my field does it except for me and Kengo and a few people. That's really unfair because there's a lot of people who are natural. But if you eat right and you are on a progressive overload weightlifting program and you do your cardio and you do all that stuff, you don't look like these people unless you're a genetic freak. So I have about 11% body fat right now. I go between about 7.5 to about 14% throughout the year. I cut, I bulk, I do these things to sort of maximize my, sort of muscle retention. So I'll go up a little bit, go down a little bit. I'm riding my bike 15 to 20 hours a week.
Yeah.
I'm doing intervals. I'm lifting heavy. I'm doing all these things, and I put this all together. And if you have a balanced approach to your physical fitness, you're not going to look like these guys who are 22 years old and on gear. Having said that, if you are having some health concern, I'm not here to judge you if you're taking testosterone or something like that.
That's not what that's about. I'm just saying it in general because it makes its way into,
I do have a couple of people in my gym who are open about doing hormone replacement, either testosterone or other things, and they are taking peptides. And I talk to them about it a lot. A lot of people, we've had 2 people through who took Ozempic. I talked to them about it and I expressed my concerns, but they're adults. That's not up to me. But I would never promote any of that stuff because we're not at the end of the story here. So these stopping points, these sort of transition points where you say, oh, now we're all going to do this. Well, all those people might get sick. So that's really on them. I would discourage it.
Okay. Yeah. That's fair.
Anything. So for testosterone, for muscle growth, for any sort of like women's hormone needs or children or anything, I'd say everyone just, hey guys, chill out.
Yeah.
Cool it out. There's other things that you could focus on, which are the boulders. Those are the pebbles. Yeah. Let's try to get to the end of this road. And if you need a medical intervention, then you can pursue a medical intervention, but don't do that first. People are lazy and people are, they're looking for a quick fix. And no matter how much they have exposure to someone like me or someone who's trying to talk sense into them, they're going to do what they're going to do. And then you just help them along their way, regardless if they're doing what you want them to do. Yeah. It's like if your dad is a drunk or something like that, you don't say, I'm not going to hang out with him because he's a drunk. You help him through it. Maybe you can minimize how much they drink. Hang out with him when
he's not drunk.
Yeah, or whatever. You got to sort of figure out what you're going to do.
Find your way around that. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. I wanted to ask about some case studies.
Yeah.
Just from your program, from what I've seen you do, which I think is very impressive and strong sports and all that's awesome. But what are some of the case studies that you can point to where you say, I know what I do works because of X, Y, and Z? Maybe there's a person or two that you can talk about.
On the elite level, I took a young kid, chubby kid, to a competitive amateur boxer. And his transformation, while I can't claim all of it because he is who he is, it's a hard thing because do I coach to the level of my elite person or do I coach to the level of the person who's the worst in the room who can't remember anything? Is my coaching quantified, or is the capability of a single person an example of what I can do? And I can't because there's too much variety there. But an elite athlete, you take him to the point where he's lost a lot of weight. He's gained a lot of muscle. He's squatting as a boxer, 300 pounds plus. He's deadlifting more than that. He's bench pressing. He's pressing. He's able to do high intensity intervals. He can handle a huge workload where other people could never hunt. He has a great endurance base. He's got all these pieces as evidenced by different performance metrics. He's doing great on every level. And we made this guy into a competitive elite athlete. No problem. Yeah. A regular kid who came in who was a chubby kid. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, so like, what would you say is maybe like the inverse of that type of?
Well, let's say like an old person.
Yeah.
Like an old person is a person who came down and you say, okay, we're going to see if you can squat. And they say, oh, I can't squat. I can't go down that. Or you go, okay, can you sit down? Yes, I can sit down. And you take them through the sort of the approach of teaching them the proper mechanics for sitting down and standing up. Teach them the drivers of those muscles, make them understand over time, not in a dumb lecture, but over time, how mechanics works, how physics works, help them understand that they can get stronger at something. and then set them on their way to being able to not only squat, but put weight on their back. If they can't put it on their back as some sort of shoulder dysfunction, they could have toward labrums. They could have, malfunctioning this or that. And then you figure out how to get some weight on their back. So there's all sorts of apparatus to do that. And you get them to actually start to go through these 3 phases of development: the mitochondrial efficiency, meaning calling more muscle fibers to the party, right? And then you get them a little denser. And then if you're lucky, you can put some weight on them if they can eat properly. But all these things are really important. So, if you get a person who comes in and they have, they're a wackadoo, they come in and they say, I want to be hot. Bikini season's in 3 months and I'm going to be hot. And you're looking at them like, well, why are you asking me about that? Everyone knows how to do that. You just starve yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we didn't touch on that.
Yeah, but it's like, that's what the culture says.
Yeah.
Take pictures of yourself with the light over top, and you can just lose muscle, lose fat, make yourself into a skinny fat mess, get metabolic disorder, bounce back, be 30 pounds heavier when you come out of whatever this hole is.
Yeah.
And then just stop going to the beach altogether. Or you can spend the time and the effort to transform your body and your metabolism to be able to support this effort over years.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the student that you want. So someone comes to you with a crazy goal.
Changing behavior kind of
you
thing.
say, is that really your goal? So you drill down whether or not they come in as a 2-on-1 client or they come into the club. You say, what are you here for? And they say, I really want to be healthy. You're like, okay, I can work with that.
Yeah.
I want to get stronger. Oh, I can work with that. I want to get better at boxing. I can work with that. I can do it. I want to be I want to have a more powerful physique. I can kind of deal with that. You're going to get that. But is that person who's chasing that thing going to be patient enough? Now we start getting into the woods. I want big biceps. You're like, okay, do you have the genetic predisposition towards getting biceps? I could do bicep curls all day and I'll never get big biceps. It's just never going to happen. So what do you want? You don't get tall playing basketball, right?
Yes.
You don't get long and lean dancing.
Right.
Long and lean people get into dancing. Tall people get into basketball.
Right.
Right. And then you think it's a cause and effect going the other direction, but it's not. It's a selection process.
Yeah.
Right. So people who are sturdy with wider waists get into powerlifting.
So
right?
How do genetics, we didn't talk about genetics much.
For strength training, everyone should strength train. But when someone comes in with a physical picture of what they want, oh, I saw this lady on Instagram, I want to look like that. And you say, okay, strength training. Someone comes in and says, I want to be healthier. Like, okay, strength training. Oh, I want to get better at tennis. Okay, strength training.
Yeah.
If they resist that and say, I want to do this specific exercise because I want to have a shelf on my butt, or I want to do this, or I need big biceps. You're talking to someone who has been so corrupted by media that they're very difficult to help. They're always going to resist because they want the quick fix.
Right.
And the quick fix isn't available.
Yeah. We were talking about this earlier about how there's been this wave of athletes that have just gotten healthier over the years.
Yeah.
Like they seem stronger, and you start to see that even pro golfers now are doing strength training, and the basketball players look huge. We're talking about Larry Bird, and he was skinny. So like, what is it that's in the cultural, theme here when we get on Instagram and we're like, oh, hey, this basketball player is big, I can be big, or this person's jacked and he's just an influencer, I should be jacked, or right? Like, how do we deal with that as a society, and how do you deal with that as a coach?
Well, I think your highest order of a reason to do something should be for vitality, right? And that vitality comes from specific things, and you just want to be a more whole, vital person.
Yeah. You
want to be dependable. You want to be durable. You want to be capable. That's the first. You also want to be honest and whatever, and those sorts of things. And there's other qualities, but the higher order thing is you want to be these things. So when your son calls you and says, hey, I'm going to move to a new house, he can call you to help move. If your daughter calls you and says, I need to do this for my my general health, you can help them. You know how to help them. If someone calls you to help you do something, you're the person they call. You want to be the most dependable person in every one of your circles, and capable.
Yeah.
Now I'm 5'6.5". I used to be 5'7". I'm shrinking, right? Right now I have an injured labrum. I've had 4 knee surgeries. I've maybe had 15 operations. I've been through the ringer.
Yeah.
I raced bicycles for 20 years. I boxed and wrestled and did jujitsu, and I strength trained for years. And I am an example of someone who could possibly be a wreck.
Right.
And I am almost 100% healthy in every metric.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, I want to talk about the bikes a little bit, because that's really fascinating. You ride a lot. You also do international tours.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about that briefly, because that's pretty interesting.
Well, I got into bike racing when I was a kid because I had high blood sugar. And I'd started with BMX, but I'd sort of like grown out of it.
And is that good for kids with high blood sugar?
Any sort of athletic activity.
Yeah.
So I had sort of had a friend who got me into bike riding, and then I went to Germany. I went to an exchange program and lived there, and a doctor said, "You have high blood sugar. You're 14 years old. This is not going to stand." And I was like, "What does that mean?" He goes, "You need to exercise." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." So I went and bought a $300 bike at the time. That I think it was like 5 Deutschmarks to the dollar. So I got some incredible deal for this entry-level racing bike, and I started riding it around where I was in Germany. And I came back and I was like, I like this. And I started riding around, and I bumped into some kid who was like a national champion. Another guy, that guy's a friend of mine to this day, named Neil Fraser. He owns Redbird Restaurant downtown. And he said, "Oh, ride with me." And I was like, "Oh, this is great. We're riding around."
Really? That's funny.
Yeah. I just met him on the corner of Laurel Canyon and Mulholland. I bumped into him. We became lifelong friends. So we're riding together. He's like, "Why don't you ride for my club?" "Oh, I got on a club. Why don't we start racing?" I met another friend, this guy, Matt Frauman. His dad was into bike racing. This all sort of kind of happened parallel to each other. I started doing training races, and I started to race, and I was terrible at it. I mean, I was a young 14-year-old. I was immature physically. Mentally, I think I was okay. But physically, I was just small. I was just not much of an athlete. I was okay, but nothing special. And I was doing everything wrong. Training too much, training too hard, doing all sorts of everything wrong. So I got into cycling. I started racing as a junior. I got up to some capable level. I got in a junior development team or a club that helped me with bicycles and equipment and travel and all that sort of stuff. We got to the point where we were traveling around, went to Mexico, Canada, back east, did all these races, and I became an adult. I went to college. I kind of backed off. I finished with college. I was still racing, but kind of casually. Got out of college. I was like, "Oh, I want to start racing again." Kind of went back up to an elite level, did a few years, got to a point, hurt my knees. Opened my first gym in 1992 or something like that. Started strength training, recovered, then raced at a pretty high level from 97 to about 2000. And then 30 years old, I wasn't going anywhere. I was kind of spinning my wheels, but I still loved it. In around 1992, at the same time, I started a bike tour company in Vietnam with two lifelong friends. We were on our way to Vietnam. His friend, Pat Morris, who still owns a company called Velo Pura or Intertravel China Company. They're two different departments of the same thing. And you did a
tour there recently, right?
Yeah. And I had this other partner, Mike Romano, and we went over there, and right on my way to getting to Vietnam where we wanted to go, I got news that my girlfriend at the time was pregnant. I rushed home. That's my son. He's now 31, Willard Ford. Great, perfect kid.
Yeah.
No complaints. I go back to become a dad, and I open a gym. I do all these things. My son's born. I get back into bike racing. I start doing it again. I have a gym until I move to Los Angeles, all this stuff. But in the meantime, I'm doing these bike trips in the background to support all my other habits. So we went to Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. At first, I would just go for a couple days here and there, and then I was going for a few weeks, and I started leading tours. And then in 2006, I stopped. So it's like quite a few years later. And then I didn't do it again until COVID. When COVID hit, being the kind of person I was and not getting enough money for the government, not having enough money put away, I went right back to work working in Mexico and in Vietnam. And I started taking tours as soon as they opened up Mexico. I went into Vietnam in Mexico, and Mexico was pretty open in Baja. We never had anyone get sick on the tours. And then we also in Vietnam, once they opened, we started going back there. And, I lead about 2 bike tours a year of anywhere from 8 to 15 people. And they're usually what we call the pro tours. So these are more experienced cyclists. We ride anywhere from 80 to 140 miles a day, every day. And it's the greatest way to see a country there is.
Yeah.
Walking is too slow. Driving is too fast. Flying is too much too soon. You really absorb the experience. It's fantastic.
I have a buddy that just rode to Chicago from LA. And one of the guys
the northern or the southern route?
I don't even know.
Okay.
I don't even know. I don't even think they had a plan. Apparently one of the guys
Just
that
hope he
went
didn't
with
go
him,
through Texas.
one of the guys that went with him didn't, I guess he'd never ridden before, and someone just like gave him gear and they made it the whole way. I don't know how many weeks it took him, but he told me, he's like, I will never do that again.
If you're not prepared, it's a bad experience.
I think someone like flipped over their bike and it was like a whole crazy thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We also did these cultural tours, culinary tours. It all came full circle. Cool. Neil would lead some culinary tours for Patrick. And it was called at the time, it's still called Indochina Travel Company. I never had anything to do with that. I was just on the cycling side.
Yeah.
It was called Velo Asia. Then it became Velo Pura because we added Mexico and South America.
Yeah. Was it hard to get back into it after taking such a break?
I never took a break from riding.
Like you personally never took a break?
Not from riding, but from being a tour leader. Yeah, it was hard for me to subject myself to adapt to no longer being the boss, because now Pat is my boss. I only do it twice a year.
Yeah.
And we're talking about it all the time and whatever, and I'd like to do it more because it's a kind of a vacation doing what I
Sounds
want.
like fun. Yeah.
However, it's not exactly restful. Riding 150 miles or 140 miles or 80 miles a day every day for a couple of weeks is not restful. You come back beat up, right?
Yeah.
So you're beat up in all the travel, you're beat up, but it's an incredible experience every time. There's always new things happening. I love going to Mexico.
Yeah.
I'm going to another trip in Mexico next spring. I'm probably going to book Japan for a group in this fall. And it gives me a break from what I'm doing. And then now that Kengo is fully embedded in the gym, he can cover everything when I'm gone.
Yeah.
And we're just the only two head coaches, Will and Kengo, but we have a couple guys who can help out with the club.
Yeah.
So we have one of our really learned, 2 or 3 really sort of advanced boxing coaches who help with that stuff. They're all, guys who have fought a bit and they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're queued up on our methodology.
So first of all, thank you for the time to have this conversation. I always like to bring these things to a close with a few questions. One of those questions is, in 5 years from now, if we're sitting across from each other, what single statement would you like to be true about what you've been able to accomplish with Strong Sports?
For me, I've accomplished everything I want in terms of the club and the business, in terms of its look, feel, and the service it provides. But I need to retire. So my idea is to build this business, not just in terms of the ability to service more clients, but the financial side of it, so that I can retire and then I can take the secondary role behind Kengo, right? Teach him how everything's done, but teach him right. And that's one of the reasons I'm working with you. I need to know how to start stacking some money away. COVID broke me. I hate to publicly say what happened to me financially, but if they had designed something that was aimed at a certain type of business or a certain type of person,
It was at you.
it was like I was in the middle of the crosshairs,
yeah.
right? And in the crosshairs, I lost everything that I had amassed up to that point. Not poor me. I'm happy. I wake up every day excited to go to work.
When you have a kick-ass gym and
it's
you got
fun.
cool people that
Nice
come in,
people.
everyone loves being there.
Everything's great.
It's awesome.
So in 5 years, I hope to have built it back so that I have my nest egg that I can comfortably retire and get into that next phase of life. So even if I retire at 65, I'm 55 now. At 65 or 70, I'm still going to coach. I'll never give that up. It's the most fun seeing my friends. Now it's my life. I see all these people. There's people who have been with me since almost day one.
Wow.
So
that's a testament into itself.
Yeah. I mean, from the first 6 or 8 people come, there's still 4 of them are still with me.
Yeah.
And the 4 other either moved away or had 2 kids or whatever, or changed their job. But it wasn't like people just floated in and out.
Right.
Now with Will and Kengo, it's a little different. It's more of a demanding relationship between trainer and student or athlete. Trainee. Yeah. So it's really, that's a little bit different. So the value proposition for them is different, and for me.
Yeah.
So the idea is those people are getting a holistic approach to what they need. And I think I know what they need.
Right.
Yeah. They come in and tell me what they need. They're probably at the wrong place.
So if Strong Sports was an animal, what animal would it be?
Gorilla.
Why?
Because they're cool.
Because
they're good with their own children.
They're good. Yeah.
And they're just, they're strong. Yeah. Or maybe, I have Cane Corsos, 2 Corsos. It's like you want to be the affable guardian.
Yeah.
In every aspect. The affable, perfectly well adjusted, using as least force as necessary.
You are the affable guardian.
That's the whole point.
Yeah,
but still capable.
Right.
Right. So,
All right. So last question. What is the number one reason someone should work with you in your gym and Kengo and get involved?
Number one reason is that we have a clear idea of what the deliverables are. And it's derived from the collective experience of people who think about this stuff all the time. So after you're done at the gym, we don't stop thinking about you. We have a clear idea of how to help you get what you want. And if it's not something in line with what we can give you, we will tell you to move along, and not in an elitist way. To say, listen, if you're here to bodybuild, you're in the wrong place. Bodybuilding is great. It's an awesome sport. It's going to lead you down a road that I'm not interested in taking, and I'm not capable of teaching it. It's a very involved process. There are experts in that field. If you're here to get a bigger bust or a bigger butt, and that's your only concern, you're in the wrong place. You need to go to a plastic surgeon, and you need to go to a place that's going to give you what you need.
But you're in the right place
if you are primarily concerned with longevity and improved quality of life. And by quality of life, I mean physical, how you move through the world. And I think all of the downstream consequences of having a good diet, good program, a good social environment is that you're going to be happier.
Yeah. Awesome. The affable guardian. All right. Willard, you're the man. Thank you.
Yeah. We have Kengo to back it up.
We have Kengo to back it up.
Yeah. He's big.
All right. So we'll put the, information in the show notes. I know you guys are opening up the Will and Kengo 2-on-1 May 3rd, having a little bit of a party down out there.
Yeah. To go there, you go to strongsports.us.
Strongsports.us.
That's the website. Or at Will and Kengo. There's not much there yet. The old Strong Sports Social Club social media is up. You can go check it out, but it's not really germane to what we're trying to do right now. Right now, what we're trying to do is build the 2-on-1 business. If you're an old student who used to be with me and you somehow come across this, yes, we're accepting old members back in, but it is a first come, first served basis. And sometimes you got to wait a little bit, but we're pretty close to our max capacity on the gym side, on the club side. But on the 2-on-1, we have plenty of time and resources to help you out and get to a better place.
Awesome. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. That was fun.